James Haskell, welcome to the Hurt to Lean podcast. I am incredibly excited about having you on and for this conversation we're about to have.
Thank you. I mean, not many people are incredibly excited to have me do anything, so I'm very excited that you're excited. I hope I won't let you down. I am perpetually disappointing in real life, but hopefully today will be a different one.
It will be different, James, I promise you. What were you like as a kid, James? Were there any early signs of the James Haskell we know today?
I think the James Haskell that you may or may not know or comes out has always been in existence. It's a hard one to know what I was like as a kid, because my childhood and my early memories were always framed around like sport and playing army and running around and just being constantly doing activities. When you look back at it now, myself being a parent, I kind of understand that my mum was like absolutely just tire him out, because I was all over the place at all times. I was very socially unaware. I had a very sort of not privileged background, upbringing in regards to just my family were very present. I sort of didn't have any real hardships in certain aspects. My parents always financially stretched themselves to provide opportunities for my brother and I. So a lot of my childhood was very much centered around fun and play. I had an amazing grandma, and we were always doing things and, going on trips. And we had maybe, one holiday a year or two, maybe to Portugal, and was always in and out swimming pools, just running around. So in terms of kind of pop music and pop culture, I just wasn't really aware of that until I started to go to school at like 14. I just was not cool in any way, shape or form. And so I think as a person, I was show off. I think I was loud. I was a performer. I think I was quite big for my age. So, I was getting into trouble a lot in terms of, just probably being clumsy or overdoing things, or, somebody say do it, so I go and do it. And I think that was a big sort of element of that. And I remember now when I meet people, they kind of go, "Oh, I remember you. You were a proper little shit." I get that a lot. And people, or there's an intake of breath or whatever. I mean, my mum always sort of saw me through rose-tinted glasses. I think my dad was quite critical. And even then, going to public school, you become indoctrinated and you become you're a bit like those animals that can't be released back into the wild. An animal in captivity. You kind of, don't really have it. You're kind of a sort of very rarefied atmosphere, and then you then go back out of the world again, and you realise you've got to unlearn all the things you learned at school, going to a single-sex school. So I'm constantly on a journey, but yeah, I think it was definitely some features of what you see now when I was younger.
And your mum signed you up for a rugby club when you were, incredibly young.
Yeah, 5,
illegally,
yeah.
didn't she?
Yeah, it was under set. Yeah, my mum. I think basically my mum. Yeah.
I say illegally. I mean,
I know, not police going to come around. Yeah, she did. She lied about my age to sign me up to the under sevens. I was a big kid. I think my dad used to play rugby when he was younger. I don't think to any good level. Back in the day, pubs weren't open on Sundays. Licensing laws were very, very difficult, so you couldn't get a pint anywhere, but you could get one at a rugby club. My dad would go and would drink at the rugby club. My mum would get me and my brother out of the house. We went to go and play again. Early memories. I had no idea what I was doing. I remember scoring a try and some parent looking down at me going, "Oh, you silly boy." I was like, "I don't understand. I've scored." And then I realised I'd scored behind my own line. Obviously, which is quite a feat in itself. And I never wanted to be a rugby player. I actually wanted to drive a digger. I was obsessed with diggers. And actually, the first thing I ever utilised my Z-list fame was to get a JCB. I had one for a year and I used to drive the training in it and go and do the neighbours. Took out a load of trees for them and managed a farm and used to do all the ditching and stuff. And then, the rugby club stuff was just really part of my childhood.
But do you think part of her maybe channeling your energy into the rugby was because you were an overactive, hyperactive child?
Yeah. So do you know what? It's interesting. My childhood, I remember my mum and dad, and without interviewing them, I remember there was obviously, I was when I applied myself, I was able to be good at schoolwork, but to concentrate was a struggle. I had a lot of energy. And I do remember them obviously trying to, work out what was not wrong with me, but how they managed me. Again, I don't I don't think I was like one of those like nightmare kids that you see that's super disruptive. I think I was able to sit and do certain things. I just think it wasn't consistent, and I was always fucking about and probably wasn't listening. And so, because I remember my parents, that there was this, they took me to see all these different people. I remember vaguely about that. And there's one where they used to brush the top of my lip with these paint brushes and my cheeks and my stuff, which must be like must to do with nervous system stuff or something else. And then there was other ones that was like different ways of trying to make me concentrate, and obviously being diagnosed with dyslexia and all these kind of bits and pieces. And this was, I don't know, was it not early 90s, like 91, 92, maybe slightly earlier than that as well. Yeah, like 88, 90. And so I remember them trying loads of things, because my mum at night trying to brush these things because this bloke had told her that I don't know what was going to do, help me concentrate, calm me down. It must have been to do with the nervous system. I don't ever remember what it was for. And obviously off the back of that was then going to see this lady at she must have been a clinical psychologist or psychotherapist, whatever it was, and then me being diagnosed with ADD without the hyperactive disorder. I'd never heard of it. I had no idea what it was. I'd never met anyone else with it. And then obviously putting me on Ritalin from, must have been about 9 to 16 when I, or 17 when I was trialled for England under 18s, because you couldn't take Ritalin because it was a performance enhancing drug. So, and then I never took it again after that. And I don't know, I just, in that interim period, you kind of learn to concentrate and focus. But I think when I said at the start, my childhood was full of activities, it was, I think, my mum's effort just to keep me entertained. So I did everything. We'd go to those activity camps, summer camps. But both my parents worked as well. So, my mum didn't work when we first, she worked, but then we had my brother. She then was a mum, and then basically went back to work as soon as he started school. So basically our summers were activity camps. We'd have people pick us up from school, like nannies, or we'd go to aftercare places. So my parents were, my dad in particular was a workaholic and was not absent, but I remember him being very busy, and my mum working very hard as well, and still works to this day now. And I think a lot of it was just to keep us entertained, really, and I think channel my energy. So I slept and was tired. But as I said, I never had. Well, I was told I didn't have the hyperactive thing, but I don't know. So I technically have ADD, but
It is interesting because I grew up as well in a house where holidays were full of activities, and I do sometimes wonder if I had been left actually as a young child just to be with the birds and the bees and to actually use my imagination, would I have then developed OCD? I don't know. I mean, I know there's this sort of nature versus nurture argument, but I do feel that if you are left to your own devices and there are less of those external things to kind of latch onto, and it's not as go. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, look, I think the nature versus nurture argument. Are you always predisposed? Were you always going to have it? Were you genetic? There's so many things that. I can show you twins brought up in the same house and the same family and be completely different. Same stimulus, but viewed through two different optics. It's very hard to know. I think, for example, with my daughter, when I have her on my days, I don't like sitting in the house. I want her doing things. I want her thinking. I want her, just out there playing, and whatever guise it is or whatever stimulation, would I take her to the London Aquarium? Natural history, soft play. Playing sports. I want her to be active, and I think a lot of adults now, are not active enough. I think a lot of people don't utilize the body that they've been given, and I think people forget. Well, I firmly believe, and I've yet to find anyone to counter it, but I think there's like 4 things you can control in life: how you treat your mind. So we're given this amazing tool. Obviously, it's wired very differently in different people, but everyone can find a use for it, whether it's reading or escapism or art or music or whatever ability you have. There, you will have an ability, even if you're not intelligent at all, have learning difficulties or have a disability. There'll be something you'll be able to do to enjoy. You just got to find what it is. Same thing with the body. We're all given these bodies. Some of them work better than others. Some people can. You see it with people with disabilities. You go off and play Paralympics. There's always something you can do if you want to do it, and I think it's important that you control how you look after it. I think if you for example, overeat or undereat or do whatever once you break your body, you very rarely get a second chance with it. And I know I've got arthritis in my ankle. I can't really, I limp everywhere. I've had spinal surgery, arthritis in my wrists now. But I utilise my body the most I can do. And it's the same thing with my training now. I look after it because it's important to look after it. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They don't appreciate what they've been given until it's too late. So, I drive around all the time. People forget that now in society, that you've got to look after your body. And I think the other two things you control is how you treat people. You've got a choice whether you're a prick or not, or whether you want to be nice to people or understand people. And also remember that nobody gives a shit about your problems except you. So making your problems everyone else's problems. And I think the last thing is how hard you work. And I think for me, those elements are really important about, and that's kind of what I always try to focus on with what I'm doing. And that's the kind of mindset I've grown into. But I think when you go through these things, were we always going to end up with them? Was I always going to be like that? It's fine. I think you can learn to manage them if you have a mindset of like, I need to listen to other people's feedback. I need to be aware I can get help. And maybe with stimulus, I think it's important. I think my daughter being stimulus is great. I think the ability to sit on your own and play without other people and be able to sit in your own company, a lot of adults can't do it. And I think that's an important trait to have. I see it in relationship breakdowns, that you have two people that are codependent, one steps away, one falls over. You need to have the ability to be yourself. When you're having a bad time, or you've lost a relative, or your money problems, you can lean on your partner. But at some point when they step away, you've got to stand on your own 2 feet. And I think you as a kid, like I don't know, but things can trigger you in different ways. But also maybe the stuff that loads of activities was important, because if you hadn't had that, you might have gone, you might be a completely different person anyway. And I do truly believe that people who haven't played team sports, for example, or been part of a team, don't appreciate that life does not just evolve around them. You see it in a microcosm with single children. That I want it now, and mum and daddy give it to them because they love you so much. But more often than not, they turn into selfish arseholes or narcissists.
Yeah, I think a big takeaway from that is that only you are in control of your destiny. And I think that's definitely something on my healing journey, is that you can have any number of world experts or the best doctors, but ultimately you're the one that decides to change. And it's so hard when you're in the thick of a mental health issue and you're like, I'm in the trenches here, I'm powerless, I can't do anything. And unfortunately, as you also alluded to, with maturity comes that level of awareness that, we do only have one body. Sadly, I've broken my body too, repeatedly, and it's miraculous in its ability to bounce back. But I know as I get older, that resilience will lessen. And actually, as I get older, I don't want to beat myself up because I can sort of foresee the consequences of it. But it's so easy to get caught up in the sort of, and like you said about influencers, this sort of constant desire to be better, to be skinnier, to be stronger, and actually just sitting with what's okay for you. There is no normal, for anyone, really.
Okay, I think, look, there is no normal, and there's no thing. So I think it's a multi-layered approach, because the expectation is we're all meant to see the world in the same way, and you will discover that we don't at all, and that what I see through my eyes and what I taste and smell is completely different often from what you would do and what you would do. And so I think with what is normal and what's not, I think nobody should ever tell you what's acceptable and what you should ever look like. The understanding you should realise is that nobody's ever satisfied, really. I don't think. I think you will learn by the time you got to a deathbed that it was always about the journey. It was never about the results anyway, because every time you get to one result, you want more. But it takes us a while to realise that. And I think, unfortunately, we have to understand that, there is no normal. You will always realise that only you fix you, and it doesn't matter how long it takes you to do it, but you can't ever convince an addict, sweet talk an addict, abuse an addict, barter with an addict, do anything. The only person they ever change is when they have to change, and it's when they've hit rock bottom. And when your teeth have all fallen out, is that too far? When you've lost all your family and you're like covered in sores, is that too far? People will lose the perspective, but at some point, the ones who do go from those extreme states of losing it, they did it because they decided to do it. And I think as long as you are open to getting the tools to change and actually doing the work, the biggest thing around mental health for me at the moment is we've now got more awareness, excellent. We're talking about it, amazing. But nobody is matching talk with action, or for the most part. And the thing is, it's never been more prevalent, but it's also never been used more as an excuse. People are now hiding behind it. and they are not doing anything about it. And the reason that you will have made improvements in your own life was you got expert help, and you've got to find the right people, and you've got to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince or princess. And when you find the right person that appeals to you and they've got the right modality that works, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, it will never change. And the point is that, it's the same way with training. If I pick up weights, and it's always a great analogy with body. If I pick up weights and I lift weights, the next time I lift some more weights, but I do it and I turn up, my body will change. If your brain is exactly like every other muscle, if you revisit it over and over again, you will make those changes. But nobody can make you. You can sit through a therapy session and feel super empowered and motivated and walk straight out of there and fall straight into the same trap as you always did and not do any work and just flip from one job, one therapist, one treatment, one modality, one thing the rest of your life. But at some point, the ones who change are the ones who stick to the plan and listen. The ones who don't will never, because they can't do it. And that's the same way some people get in shape, some people fail. But
yeah, I think, like you said, we have to take the advice and we have to then enaction the steps ourselves, because actually ultimately what I found is that your thought process won't change until you can prove to yourself that you can take the action. And I think that's a mistake that often people are thinking. You get so drowned in the theory, and like you said, you can talk until you're blue in the face, but actually until you take the action and you prove to yourself that you're empowered, and you, like you say with the addict, you can reach multiple rock bottoms, but until you ignite that sense of, I'm worthy of this change, and I am going to fight through that wall of anxiety on a consistent basis for a long time, which is what I'm experiencing, at the moment. And I think the more you fight and the more you really push through that wall of anxiety, the more life starts to happen, and the more the joy comes in, and the more, real shit also comes in. But ultimately, you're not a slave to your mind anymore. You're actually in control. You feel more in control of it, whether we're ever actually fully in control of our minds, because we do get led astray as humans. But I'm curious, how has your ADHD, because you often say it's been your superpower and a huge source of destruction, how has it been a superpower and a source of destruction?
So it's interesting again, because the truth about this, the ADHD or ADD, right, is when I told you when I was 8 or 9 and I got diagnosed and I had it, I never met anyone from the age of 9 to 17 that had it. I never spoke to anybody about it. My housemaster at school knew it, I had it. The school nurse knew I had it. The doctor, my mum and dad. My friends didn't know I had it, because it didn't, I wasn't, the word, it's not like, I had something like anxiety, something that could stop you in your tracks, and fucking, palpitations and panic attack. It just didn't operate like that. I took the medication. I look back at it now. Did I feel like tranquilized or different? Not really. I think if I was trying to tell you what it did to me, it potentially made me more, I'll be able to have bouts of super concentration, which I have retained to this day. So I can get unchecked sometimes, very hyper focused, and it's dangerous before bed sometimes, because then I try to do so many things all at once and I have to keep channeling in. So in the morning I wake up and I do my emails, but I don't have my WhatsApp open or my diary calendar. So I do all my emails and then I go onto my WhatsApps. If not, because of the variety of careers I've got, the music production, the DJing, the afternoon speaking, the stand-up comedy, the books, the podcast, the gym business, you can easily start going from one window to another window, to social media, to post that, to look at that link, to edit that video, to do that social media, to speak to that person, to get on the conference call, to WhatsApp that bird, and it just goes round and you never get anything done. And same thing with music. I'm trying to make music production a big part of my life. Every time I sit down, I get sidetracked to my emails. And I go, it doesn't matter if I've got 100 emails, I have to fucking sit down and do it. So I've learned to compartmentalize, or even block out bits of my diary, or maybe go, look, for the next hour I'm going to do this solely without any distraction. Otherwise I'm not able to do it. But I never used it as an excuse. And the hard thing about ADHD for me now is that I meet about 10 people a day who told me they've got it. and it's
like me with OCD.
Yeah, and it's like everybody's got it. Everybody's got it. Everyone thinks they've got it. Everyone tells you they've got it. But also they don't do anything about it if they've got it. That's the bizarre thing. And that is the biggest thing with the raising of awareness of mental health issues and the people speaking about it. Humans always look at the path of less resistance. It's very easy to make excuses to why you can't be where you want to be, and adopting and hiding behind a pseudo, mental health issue, or even if you think you've got one, without, as I said earlier, without doing anything about it, I find very difficult. I had to do loads of tests to understand whether I had it or not. So I find it hard. I think people. So anyway, I then had it, never said anything about it, and then somebody somewhere, I must have said it, and somebody picked up on it. And this man from the Independent, what it was, interviewed me about it, and that was probably 2-3 years ago now. And I've somehow become like a figurehead for it. But everyone keeps asking and looking for me to like reassurance, and I keep giving them like ruthless answers. And I saw this, this mother. I was DJing, and she was trying to talk to me while I was DJing, which is never that easy to do. And she kept saying, "My son, he's got ADHD, and you're his inspiration and stuff." And I was like, "That's amazing." Like, I've never used it as an excuse. I've never used it any other than just to do a million things at once, to try loads of different things, to have the desire to really embrace life and perform, and always be slightly scared of like missing out and not doing things. I've also used it as a thing of like, I'm never satisfied, which if you don't address will eat you alive, because you need to learn to be satisfied. Hence, satisfied with your body, satisfied with your partner, satisfied with your job, satisfied with achievements. And I was never satisfied with anything when I was a rugby player. But now, as outside of that life, I try to really focus on being satisfied with, if I get a song played on radio, I will celebrate all the little wins, because it's the same thing with you going through your journey. As long as you've got a clear goal of what the goals are, when you reach them, even though they might not be where your end goal is, you've got to celebrate it, because that is, as a proof, as you said, that the modality works, is proof that you can do it, and it's important to own it. It's, even if it isn't where you'd want to be. The only thing with the converse to that is if you are making excuses as to why you aren't reaching even just the smallest goals, it's basically because you're not doing what you should be doing. And I think, I use visualization a lot because I've really had real issues. The biggest issue I've ever had, far more than ADHD, was lack of self-confidence, not dealing with criticism very well. That is far more of an issue that's haunted my life than ever. And it doesn't really match up with the person you see in public, because I'm not scared to talk in front of people. I'm not scared to perform, but criticize me at things that I care about, or criticize me full stop, I find it very, very hard. Didn't have a lot of confidence in myself with my sport, didn't really believe in myself. So that's been a much more of a crippling thing for me that I've had to work so much on. Even the thought of always having negative thoughts, what happens if I make a mistake, what happens if I fuck up, having to constantly all day stop, visualize what I was thinking in a positive way, basically changing the way your mind works. And that was through therapy. I did it from 17 to, the other day. I was still doing it, and so I've always had to go back and revisit it, practice the tools. I did New Year, New You and all that shit. And I actually went back to trying to be a bit more grateful for things that I had, because I, like, on the way here, I was like, fucking hell, I've got a good life. I sat in the car, I stopped, got coffee. I love coffee. I've got a nice car. My body's fit fuck, but I'm okay. I'm on the way. Someone wants to interview me as a podcast. I'm going out to dinner tonight. I was just making music. I live in a nice life. What the fuck have I got to moan about? And so I try to, have those affirmations in my sort of warped way to sort of celebrate moments. But my life has only ever been positive with ADHD, but it's really not been a crux, and it's really not something I've had to work with. It might be the overarching factor into why I am the way I am, but self-confidence stuff was something that I unearthed when I was like 17 or 18, to the point where it was like pretty bad. Like, I couldn't, when I went to the first therapist, I couldn't tell you one game I played well in, one game I was happy with, one game I was, excited about, couldn't deal with people's criticisms, didn't, and then the advent of social media around the fact when I was like 19, 20, 21, being publicly shamed, going on to, go on the Daily Mail online, under any article, and they're the most horrific insults you've ever seen. Luckily now, I understand the perspective that if you're a big enough loser to be responding onto a newspaper, and you watch the psychology of the people around them, so when you can get that perspective, you go, and it's not even like, when your mum says they're just jealous. Like, they are the worst kind of people in society, and I imagine if you confronted them as they often are, and they'll come back and they'll be unhappy with their lives, they'll be unhappy with their body, they're unhappy with their marriage, they bully people because they've got no meaning in their own lives. But it's very hard as a person to see that, just past the fact that someone said you're a CUNT and they hope you die and that you're the worst person ever. It's taken me a long time to get to that point, but I still, with things like DJing and certain things I do, that if I mess up and I'm criticising people, it still hurts me. But whereas it would take me a couple of days, maybe a week to get over, it now takes me hours, because I spent so many years developing tools to deal with that. And those are things you have to revisit. And what people forget about mental health is, if you've got anxiety, you've got depression, you've got OCD, or you're never not going to have any of those things. You're always going to have it, but what you do to work on it is how quickly you can get back on track. So if you're having an episode or your shit's getting out of hand, it's how quickly you get back on track. People unchecked, because this is the funny thing about it. All the people who think they've got all this stuff, like ADHD and OCD and fucking anxiety, whatever, if they have an episode and they actually have got it, it could take them weeks, months, years to get over. If you have the tools, it might take an hour. It could take 15 minutes, it could 10 minutes. You could catch yourself halfway through it, change your state, because where focus goes, energy flows. So if you're having a row with someone and they make you laugh, you can diffuse that argument. If I start going down a what if, a woe is me, what if this, what if that, imagine I fucked up here, and I stop myself, go visualize, imagine I smash that DJ set, imagine I absolutely make them all laugh, and I know what the feeling like is to smash it. Or when I'm playing a game, imagine I drop that ball, imagine I caught that ball, and what it feels like in my fingers, the visualization, because your brain can't tell whether it's happened or not, and that's what people forget. It genuinely doesn't know whether it's happened or not. And so they did a test with a load of prisoners in prison, who some of them would play golf, some of them hadn't, and they basically got them to visualize every single day playing golf. When they came out, all of their handicaps improved, but they'd played no golf, because your brain doesn't know when it happens. So if you talk about yourself in a negative way all the time, or you visualize negativity, you freak out negativity, your brain doesn't know it hasn't happened, so it thinks it's happened, so it becomes real. So you manifest symptoms, real symptoms. And it's the same thing with all the things that we're talking about today, is that I have to consistently go back and work on it and doing it. And I catch myself all the time, but I've got the awareness, and that's what revisiting mental health and working on it looks like. Because if you could fix you would have already fixed yourself. The fact is you can't, so you've got to get the tools to be able to change and do it. And I think that aspect has been my OCD. And the destructive thing is I'm just a bit of a fuckhead, really. I kind of, I do things sometimes just to see what will happen. I say things when I shouldn't say things. I wind things up. I take risks, and I probably, I end up reacting badly to certain things and just getting myself into the newspaper, really. But also, half the time I'll say things because I love watching people's reactions. Like and I like certain things I've said. I kind of fascinated by people's body language and the way they are and how they are. And the reason I pick, when you came in about the phone thing, you just kind of pick up on it straight away, like how people are, how. Particularly with me, with women, you see them like straight away look at you, and go, oh, you're everything that you're everything that I would hate in a man or not, and then just breaking down barriers straight away, or saying something or being funny, and then I'm going, oh, you just see it all the time. It's always a constant game of like body language, subconscious, conscious, that I'm just really fascinated with. So most of my stuff I do for effect, really, but then some of it is I'm just an idiot, and I think a lot of it is I just love making other people laugh, and sometimes it's other people's detriment, which doesn't always go down well.
No, I mean, I think it is interesting, and you strike me as being a very curious person. You're interested in people.
Yeah.
But I do find that going to the reckless side of things, I do often find it's something that I have many conversations with people on this podcast about. And I think a lot of people with mental health issues, it's this irony, because in some respects, they like to be super safe. They're crippled by a lack of self-confidence, if you've also alluded to. And yet, on the other side, it's like you go from 0 to 100. You can be incredibly reckless. You're driving down, the motorway at 120 miles an hour. You're suddenly like going into a freezing cold ocean, like not really like sort of knowing what you're jumping in. It's funny. And then other people you forget, who are those very middle path people, lots of things in moderation, like, don't like to be too hot, don't like to be too cold. Whereas those of us who kind of push ourselves and are extremists do also tend to be crippled by a lack of self-confidence. And I am very fascinated by that. But I also think your point to how important it is to treat your brain like a muscle. You train it like you train for weights in the gym. And if you keep feeding it a negative dialogue, and like you, if I'm having a really bad day, then I actually have to say to myself, this morning I woke up, I was feeling shit. I was feeling like really like
even
lethargic.
I was
I know, James, you were the highlight of the day. I can assure you. But I was like, how am I going to trudge through this morning? Yeah. And actually just knowing that your mood, now I'm like, well, my mood might change by 10 o'clock. And sure enough, by 11 o'clock, I felt great. I had a bounce in my stride. I came here. I knew, James, that you were arriving. So, the anticipation of that kept me going. But, then it turns into like the best afternoon that I've had in a week. Yeah. So actually like reminding ourselves of that and practicing those. Last night I said to myself out loud, I was feeling really anxious. And I was like, I'm safe and I'm lovable. and my life is going really well. And actually just saying it to myself out loud. And like you said, it's so powerful.
I think there's two really important things. Understanding what changes your state. So I use music as a tool. So the reason I went to get therapy in the first place was my godfather's wife. I was 17. My godfather said, you should speak to my wife. She's a sports therapist. She works with sports people. She does psychology. She works at the Priory. You know, she'd be brilliant. I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. No one I knew did it. I was, former public school boy. I thought it was the shit. Never thought I had any problems. Didn't need to do it. Anyway, I went to see her first session. She said, look, I think we're really good to help with you consistently performing for games, because you can do anything on emotion. It doesn't matter how tired or fucked up you are. You can always do one thing on emotion. You can't play 30 games on emotion. You need routine, structure, fallback plan, or whatever it might be. So I went to see her for that. And one of the things we looked at was, how do I emotionally get in the right state for 30 games? Because you could be tired, you could have arguments with your missus, you could be playing badly, press could be on you could be injured, you could have self-doubt, all these things. How do you switch on? So we started using the emotive power of music, and essentially what I said, where focus goes, energy flows. When you hear an amazing song that you think's great, you feel $1 million. Equally, if you have a breakup with somebody and you listen to Magic FM, you're more likely to fucking drive off the road into a wall screaming, I love you, because it's, so depressed, something it's very emotive. You don't want to listen to upset heartbreak songs when you're feeling vulnerable. And I try to look at, what do I need to get my when I say, for example, I would say I'm not anxious, but I would wake up and go, oh, this is a bit shit, and this is this, or this has happened. What I know that utilising music and putting on songs that work for me will change my mood. Making myself laugh, distracting myself will make myself laugh. And I've had to work to find out what the quick ways are. So when you are having the beginning of an issue, whatever it might be, putting the right song on, listening to the right music, calling someone up that changes your mind, having a laugh, doing something completely opposite to what you were doing, can help change your state. And that is a really important tool to understand, because if you sit in an episode or sit in a thing without changing your state, you're not going to help. The other thing about the other visualization is you have to revisit whatever tools you decide you have. You have to go back over and over them again. Everything that you have to do is you have to revisit again. Everything that is important to you, you have to go over it again. Like, you have to set time aside for visualization if that's what works for you. Whether that's positive or negative, getting thoughts into your head, you have to change. You can control your thinking by stopping yourself, having a minute wherever you are and going, I'm really anxious or whatever it might be, and go, no, I'm not. And I know what not feels like, and this is positive. And what you said about being, you're lovable, whatever it was you said, was, I've had this with partners where they've had lots of lack of self-doubt, and they say, but this, and what if this happens, and I'm not this, and I went, in life, you're going to end up collecting a load of data points. So if you're very young, you don't have a lot of life experience, you don't have a lot of stuff to rely on. As a 40-year-old person, right, if I thought I had a shit body, and I was ugly, and I wasn't nice, and I wasn't funny, and I wasn't a good DJ, and I was anxious, and nobody liked me, and all the things that you can talk yourself into. There are data points that are set in stone, that are undeniable, that don't come from your mind, that come from other references. So there's 20 or so occasions that undeniably people have gone out their way to tell me how funny I am. So it's not me. So they are concrete evidence of that. So I could write on a piece of paper, these are true, and here's the examples. I say, if I was having self-doubt of my body, my mind can trick me into believing anything about myself. And somebody online could have told me I'm ugly. But then I then look at it and go, I know that these 10 people, or this example, these magazine shoots, or this feedback is undeniable that I'm a solid 5.5 out of 10. But at least I know that it's set in
5.5, James. I think that's generous.
4.5. But that's undeniable. The fact that people go, I'm not sure people like me. The fact is, you've got friends and bits and pieces that are not paid, that are not there for your benefit, but actually love you. And I keep telling people to do it, and a lot of them don't, is to sit down and write and have screenshots, have almost a Canva of pictures and images and feedback and things that are certain, that are undeniable, that come from a third party to remind you of the truth. And it's an undeniable truth that doesn't come from you, and it just reminds you that even when your mind tricks you into not believing it, and you can't even, there's so many, they can't all be wrong, and you can't all be just doing you a favor or helping you out or trying to be nice. It's fact. And I think some people just could put a bit more time into it. as opposed to telling everyone how sad and bad they feel. If they put the same amount of energy into putting the tools down and putting some data points or putting some effort into it, when they did have an episode, you could look at it and they'd be in 10 minutes, they'd be like, the fuck was I worried about? Here's 15 examples of why people really love me. Here's 15 examples of me looking great. Here's 10 examples of why I'm funny. Here's all the things that I've achieved. And then you just get on with your day. And then the next time it comes, you sort it. But what can happen is, you had to convince yourself, have a moment, and it gets better. You've done the work. But somebody who hasn't even done what you've done all day could not get out of bed. Don't want to leave, fucking cancel everything. I don't want to go out. I'm not worthy. This is shit. But,
I know. I think it's the wallowing that is so dangerous. I think, it's teaching yourself that your mind, like you said, your mind is always going to play tricks with you. And your mind might even say, when you look at that piece of paper that's got all these incredible pieces of validation and compliments that people get, your mind will be like, oh yeah, but they're lying. Oh yeah, but they were saying that. And it's actually then knowing to flip that and be like, no, mind, you would say that because that's just how you're wired.
It's basically backing your mind or subconscious into a corner to the point where it doesn't matter what it comes up with. There's no excuses for it, and that's the answer. Because then look, unless you are very, very mentally ill or very back, or in the throes of something else where you should be under guidance or medication or whatever to offset that. For the most part, if you actually spent a bit of time looking at it, you could find enough info on the subjects that you were weak about, or if you hadn't, then from this day onwards, start collecting it and start looking out for it, because that in itself, because you go, fuck,
It's noticing it, isn't it? It's that like red car syndrome. Like as soon as you start thinking about red cars, suddenly you see them everywhere.
But I went to, I would watch highlight reels of me, and even till the end of even till last week, I was surprised by what I was seeing. That's what I mean. That's how weird it is. Like the people would believe that I am so far up my own arse, such a rater that I could never possibly have any stuff that. I turn on a highlight reel and be like, oh my God. And so every time I watched it pre-game or on the bus or whatever it was, I'd be like, fucking wow. And it wasn't like computer AI. It was me doing it. And I was like, shit, that's fucking really good. And you walk into that thing going, I feel great. And so your mind can lead you down certain paths, but I think there are definitely tools and stuff you can put into place to do it. It just takes a bit of work, and it takes habit. It just takes habit, Yeah,
it's a habit formation. You're so right. How did you find being a rugby player in that quite macho environment and being crippled by lack of self-confidence? Did you confide in anyone ever?
No, do you know what? I think because I was very lucky, because I picked up on it at 17. When you're just in that kind of really important period of time. I think probably before that, I think my dad gave me the best piece of advice I've ever had, really, which is you can lie to everyone else, but you can't lie to yourself. And that applies on so many levels. And I remember one example of the day before I first started my professional contract at WAS. My dad sat me down and he was like, listen, you're going to need to learn to tackle. You don't really tackle properly, that you're going to get found out if you don't do it. And I was like, fucking Dad, I've signed a professional contract, I'm 17. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you know? Anyway, I had a row. And I remember I had a couple of beers and I was sitting on the sofa cuddling the dog, and I just remember going, he's right, because you can't lie. You can tell everyone else you're doing it, but especially now with the fact we live in a virtual world a lot of the time, we live with virtual friends and virtual affirmations and all this kind of stuff. When you go to bed and you put your phone down, that moment before you close your eyes, you are really left alone with yourself, and you only know what's going on. So if you drink too much, if you're an alcoholic, if you've got a drug problem, if you've got mental health issues, if you are living a secret life, you're having an affair, you can tell everyone else you're not, but you'll know. And it's the same thing with diet and food. You can tell everyone else. It's very easy to lie, hide things, not track things. Only you know. And ultimately what you will discover that when you die, or before you die, is that you're only ever in competition with yourself, and you're only ever harming you. And you might make other people's lives miserable around you, but actually you're only ever hurting you. So if you are lying to everyone else, it might buy you so far, but ultimately you will catch up with you. And I think for me, that was a really important piece of advice that I kind of learned, because it means that I would constantly check in with what I was doing. And I think there was moments with the tackling stuff where I went in the next day, went up to the guy, Joe Worsley, but one of the best tacklers in the world ever. I said to him, Joe, I can't tackle, you need to teach me. And every day for 19 and a half seasons, I practiced my tackling with him bar game day. And I became a world-class tackler at it, and that's what I did. And I was still never satisfied, and I was always a real thing if someone criticised me for it. But I worked on it, and I did what it took, and I spent hours visualising it when I wasn't able to tackle it, and that was really important. And that came out the back of not lying. I was talking to people online about taking responsibility for their actions, getting help, going through a separation. And I was like, fucking hell, James, you're full of shit. You're struggling. You haven't gone and got any therapy for a while. Got and booked in, got a therapist, started talking around, going back to doing what I need to do, go back to visualization. It's just do what you need to do better and stop worrying about everyone else, because life would be better, but we don't. It's much easier to point at someone and go, well, if you change, well, I'd be better.
It's a blame culture, isn't it? And I mean, I think that's the other thing. It's the juxtaposition of knowing that you are unique, but you're not special and different. No. And I remember that sort of slightly stark realization when I was in a treatment center, and they basically said, Pandora, you just go around thinking you're special and different, but you're no different to any other person. Like, this is the formula, and these are the steps you have to take if you want to get better. And it's like, because I think often, actually, especially I do tend to find people with mental health issues and addicts and extremists, we do have slightly inflated senses of egos and self. And I think sometimes you actually need to rein that in and be like, I'm just a tiny little dot in a universe, and I'm not actually as significant or important as I think I am. And as you say, no one actually really gives a shit apart from me. And if I lie to myself, I think that's a really powerful lesson from this, is that you only actually are, like, you're not beating the system.
What you said about people being with the sort of mental health thing, but they're more special. What it is, and I spoke to a load of therapists, so what is the common thing that you're confronted with? And it's the same one for everyone. It's, I understand where you're coming from, but my situation is different, you wouldn't understand. And that's what everybody thinks. Not that we're different and unique, it's things that you wouldn't understand what I'm going through, so that's why I can't change, or that's why you don't understand. And the point is there's 8 billion people in the world, right? We are all different in terms of how we see things, but we all have pretty much gone through similar experiences, nuanced, involving different catalysts. But you aren't different, and and people do understand, and you can view it however you want. But again, it's just another excuse. And I think once you understand that, you might view it differently, but there are ways of fixing you, and your problem is no more different than anyone else. Everyone in this room's got something going on. There's always different spheres of it. So once you open yourself up to understand that, look, you might not understand how I feel, because nobody can tell you how you feel, but the what you're going through has fixable stuff if you follow certain actions. I think that's a massive thing. And I spoke to 10 different therapists in my last book, Approach Without Caution, and they were all said everyone thinks that their problem's different and that nobody understands them. It's like, no, they do, and you're not going through anything no one else has. You know what I mean?
So maybe a slightly controversial topic, but I am curious as to how you have navigated relationships.
Do you know what? I probably had five serious relationships in my life. All of them, I think I had 5 years, 5 years, 2 years, and 10 years. I think you've got to listen to other people. Again, self-awareness is truly one of the most powerful things. When I was a rugby player, was I selfish? Yeah, really selfish. I've had partners call me a narcissist. Again, it's really weird because I looked into kind of a lot around that subject, and I think with the mindset to listen to people and go and work on it, hear people, that's not what a narcissist does.
Well, that's what I'm told. I'm always fearful of being diagnosed with narcissism, and they're like, no, because if you've got that awareness, you might be a narcissist. You're not a narcissist. No,
and I think I did make. I was very selfish. My ex-lo we quoted a couple of times. She said I was Rugby's answer to Donald Trump or something like that, and said jokingly, we were together actually, and then kind of said, I said to her famously once, listen, you're all aboard the James Haskell train, it's leaving today. If you want to be on it, you're on it, but if not, I'm not fucking around. And I think it's because you had and it sounds like such a wanky comment, but it kind of, I had one career, I had one limited amount of time to do what I wanted to do, and I was going to do it come what may. I think, obviously now in retirement, I've that burning desire is gone into other directions. So I've tried to, I've changed very much over the years. I think Chloe was amazing for me in terms of making me a better person. I came out of public school. I never went to university. I had all boys schools. For example, a subject to women, I wasn't particularly kind of, my own exposure to women, for example, would be dancing, school things, and seen as a sexual object. I didn't have any female friends. I didn't hang around with women. I didn't go to university. We didn't have any girls at school apart from the last 2 years. Our only exposure was that. Reason society's fucked a lot of times is a lot of public school boys coming out of work into higher powered jobs with no experience of women other than their mothers, or seeing them as sexual objects. And you can see why that goes wrong, and that's why I'd never send my daughter to an all one single gender school. I just don't think it's right. I don't think it helps society. I don't think it's meant to be how we are. I think you see all these guys that go from public school to go to university, and they suddenly have female friends in their halls, and they start acting, and they suddenly either, learn, or it makes them worse. But more often than not, you suddenly realise and have female friends, and you realise that, as sexes, we're completely different people, but we're equally as unique and equally as important and equally matched in lots of areas, but not, physicality, what women make up in emotion, men make up in physicality, understanding, intelligence. It kind of, we've got ourselves now in society where one's trying to do the other one down, instead of celebrating our differences and going, this is what we do differently. Not one is better or worse, but we should both celebrate it instead of going, I want what you've got, and you can't have what I've got, which is where we've got ourselves into at the moment. And I think for me in relationships, I had to learn about that, and I had to get away from that mindset of kind of, women's being as objects and stuff like that. Not I was ever consciously like that, but sort of speaking to, with Chloe and trying to, sort of end up getting those kind of shaving those sharp edges off and understandings. I think for me, the relationship stuff has definitely gone from being quite selfish to doing a lot of work on myself, doing couples therapy, understanding that we're speaking actually two completely different languages that they never tell you about at school. I mean, I could have fucked off Pythagoras' theorem and say this is how a woman's actually communicating, this is what a man's saying, and how to understand each other from the point of a practical standpoint and from an emotional standpoint. Like I was blown away when therapist was like, does one of my partners always say, you never do this, we never do this, and you're like, you hear it and you're like, what are you talking about? I did all those things and I tried to fix it practically, instead of hearing it and going, okay, you're not feeling seen, you're not feeling heard, you just want some reassurance, you've changed from feminine energy to masculine energy, and you're not comfortable with it, and you don't even know why you're upset, but you're upset because you just want to feel acknowledged. No one tells you that. So I'm just fighting you on a practical, man-only basis, going, what are you talking about? Fuck you. We don't, And now suddenly I now see it with people when they sit there and talk. Sometimes I'll come and sit in the room and a girl will just want to download. Whereas I'm listening and having opinions and going, well, what did your friend say that? Well, you want to tell them to not do that. Instead of going, really? Okay, that's interesting. How'd that make you feel? 10 minutes ago, thank you, walk off. You're like, that was really easy. But I would, if I didn't see that, I would have fought you and tried to offer help. We don't want help. So now I sit down with someone and I go, do you want me to fix this? Do you want me to listen? And I go, listen. I go, fine, I just listen. I listen. You don't want an answer because you don't need it. It's just how you express, because you're emotional, you're expressive. They don't teach you any of that. So like most people going into relationships hamstrung that they don't understand what their partner wants or what they need. The divorce rate's 52%. You've got 20% probably of people who are unhappy, who don't leave each other because of the kids and the money. You've got 10% of people who are working on it, and 10% of people who've fallen into a soulmate role, social roles, and they work on it. So I was blown away by that. So I think I was pretty crap in certain relationships, pretty juvenile for a long period of time, very selfish, and now I'm in a place where I don't know, I'm just trying to learn. But I also don't want a relationship again now at the moment. I'm pretty comfortable. I don't want to ever have to be beholden to anybody where I can go, I'm going to go and do this. They're like, no, you can't. Or this makes me feel like that. I'm like, meh, well, never mind. See you later.
I'm curious to know how fatherhood's actually changed your relationship with yourself.
Well, it taught me about love in a way that I never comprehended. I was very lucky because and this is not talked about, a lot of men find it very hard to bond with their child because, and again, women go through the same thing. And I've never seen, having gone through a pregnancy with somebody, the amount of pressure that other women put on each other, the amount of shit that is spoken, amount of like faux kind of one-upmanship in terms of like, well, I breastfed, well, I didn't breastfed, well, I did this, I didn't know drugs. Trust me, the one thing you only should ever care about with having a kid is get that fucker out and safe and healthy. It doesn't matter. As long as it comes out safe, that's the priority. All these people put so much stall by all this nonsense. Not one person's ever come up to Chloe and gone, so How did you have it? Oh, that's 10 points for Gryffindor. I then realised that after childbirth, after giving birth either naturally or C-section, they then dump this baby on you, and in the movies you're instantly bonding with it. Woman's just had a fucking guts taken out or something pulled out of her vagina. How are you meant to then suddenly bond with it? But no one ever says that, because everyone goes, oh, it's the most amazing experience that I ever had. I was just there, I was just in my moment. It's just like, it's just fucking crap. And it's the same thing with men. You get this kid, your missus is completely changed. Her body's completely changed. She's hormones are going. You haven't given birth. You've got this kid that keeps you up all night, and you're meant to suddenly have this like amazing connection. I was lucky, as I said, because I was kind of quite practical. I've been around lads for 9.5 seasons, always had kids. I'd seen kind of the right ways of doing things, wrong ways of doing things. Understood that some, it took until 3 till they wanted to, so they could see what the kid. I had best mate who was like, just basically for the first fucking year, put his fingers in his ears and pretend he didn't have a kid. Just wasn't there, wasn't at home, almost ended his marriage, didn't ever bond with a kid. Kid had a few issues and bits, and you could see like it, you don't talk about it, but kind of as guilt sort of thing, it wasn't great. From the first moment I saw Bodhi's heart scan, I was like in tears. I was like, I'm in, this is it, and I can't wait to do this, because I just had no expectations other than I was going to just deal with it on a day-to-day basis. I never thought anything more about it other than I just want her out safe. So I'd love partners in a way that I thought love was a certain way after my first relationship. And I watched too much Disney and thought that no couples ever argued and that you lived happily ever after. That's fucking shit. You always argue. Everyone argues. And so I then learned about that. And then on my next partner, I loved in a different way. The partner after that, I loved in a different way. And the partner after that, I loved in a different way. So I knew there was different ways of loving, but centered around love in inverted commas. When I had my daughter, the first moment she came out, and she came out emergency C-section, the cord was wrapped around her neck. I was sitting above Chloe's head. They asked me to look above the curtain. I'm not squeamish, but all equally, seeing my, her baby come out of her was a bit like, fuck me, this is bizarre. Hold this baby. The baby's not breathing. You're like, and then she starts screaming, and you're like, I burst into tears, like a literally uncontrollable tears. I was like, never experienced anything like it. I then had to have her for 45 minutes while she got stitched up, and I was the first one to change her nappy, and like, I completely bonded with her in this moment, and I just suddenly realised what love actually was: unconditional, primal. You will do anything for that person. Now, that doesn't mean had I found the reason for living, or was it the most fulfilling experience? No, I just learned what actual love is, right, and what that can be, and equally that I'd loved, and that love comes in different forms. But this was a primal love. So in terms of me as a person, it's giving me perspective. It's hard. They are hard kids. I wasn't ever that asked about having kids. Is it the greatest thing I'll ever do? I don't know. Am I glad I did it? Yes. Do I have an amazing bond experience with it? Yes. Am I also worldly wise and realise that life is as much for living as it is for having kids? Yeah. I think people sometimes with certain worldviews or certain interests, for them it's the greatest thing they're ever going to do, and they absolutely love every moment of it. There are moments when, I'm sitting with Bodhi, comes up to me and I hug her, she kisses me, puts both hands and says, I love you, Daddy. You're just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then there's equally where she stands up in a high chair, tries to fight you off, about to fall backwards, and only wants her mum and won't do as she's told, and tries to scoot her into the middle of the road when you're shouting at her, and you're like pulling your hair out, and the moaning and the whining and but that is all part and parcel of life. And I think what it teaches you is that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and you have to be practical. You have to live in the moment. You have to understand that nothing you plan goes the way you want it to be. You have to enjoy all of it, because it comes around full circle to where I started. It's all about the journey, and like every day's a journey. In fact, sometimes it's a shit day. That's a journey. You're learning. As long as it doesn't eat you alive, which some things can, that's okay. And I think for me, being a dad is amazing. It's hard being separated. It's hard because it's sad, because my parents still together, Chloe's parents still together. You want that. You want that you want that sort of thing for your child, because it's what you were accustomed to. But divorce rate's 50%. Plenty of people do it. Plenty of parents who are together are awful parents. Plenty of parents that are apart, they're amazing parents. There's ways of doing it. You can only put your best foot forward, but with the idea of like, how can I get it better? How can I improve?
I think that's a great takeaway. It's like sitting, in the discomfort and knowing that actually it will pass, and you can find comfort in the discomfort.
And also, but sometimes so the reason why CrossFit and F45s and all these class-based gyms are so popular is because suddenly, for the first time in anyone's life, they've actually gone and trained hard and trained properly and worked themselves to a point that they didn't know they could do, whereas most people don't train properly. And so you suddenly get the endorphins, the rush, that feel of hardship. That's why team sport's so important. Suffering together with a group of people to achieve a goal and then achieving that goal is unbelievable. Even the failure of achieving that goal, all the work that went into it, is part of it. And it's the same thing with, training to change your body, changing to change your mind. All of it, you should be used to fucking being a bit miserable and upset about it, because that's part of it. That's what makes us create the chemical reactions. That's why everyone sits in saunas and ice baths, because you're putting your body through extremes and getting different reactions. You sometimes need to go through the shit. You sometimes need to have a good thing to learn more about yourself, to experience things, to release other sides, to give you perspectives. Equally, going through shit can scar you for life and break you. And then the journey is the hardship of how do you get back out again. That's what life is all about, really. There's no easy golden ticket,
James Haskell, it's been an absolute honour, and I could go on for hours, but I fear we've taken up enough of your time, so thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having